We will call to order the Public Safety Coordinating Council meeting agenda for February 2022. My name is Eric Geyer. I'm the Director of Community Justice, and I am the chair of this group. This morning, we are going to look at some of the current trends in our community.
So on this slide, I'm just trying to show how long it's taking for us to resolve cases. So these are our pending murder cases that we have. So we've already had one in 22, and then in 21, we had 11. And so that's 20 beds that are being taken up in the jail by those folks. And the oldest one goes back to 2018. So carrying all of those older cases forward, it just adds to the amount of cases, that any one deputy is handling. In the past, we used to give one murder case to a deputy, and when they resolved it, then they would go back in the rotation to get the next one. And I now have deputies that have 2, and some deputies have 3. So that's what's really affecting us. And then this is pending Measure 11 cases. This kind of shows how we're carrying those cases over. So we're carrying over the last 4 years, 183 cases, in addition to all the new cases that are coming in. This is active cases that we're working. This isn't counting cases that are out on warrant status. So if I included the warrant status cases for each year, that would bump the numbers up pretty dramatically as well. On to the court.
So we just look at numbers and trends over time for court filings. So these are cases that have been filed through the court. So the officers make arrests, the district attorney looks at the charges, and then sends the information over to the courts. And so you can see that we've been pretty busy each year. In fact, very busy when you look compared to other courts, but the brown or the orange line is going to be misdemeanor cases filed. As you can see, fairly high, but the felony numbers are really high. We're looking at 2,199 filings for 2021 still, and we have our civil commitments are really high as well. So we're looking at a lot of times officers, take people into custody on police officer holds, or maybe somebody's lodged, but then the issue of mental health comes up, and then those cases are diverted through the civil process and not necessarily the criminal process. And so I think we're doing a good job in our county of differentiating those two, the criminal and the civil piece, because we're pretty high compared to other counties as well. And I'll show you those numbers. If you look through the last 5 years of court filings, you look at Jackson, Deschutes, Lane, Marion, Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah counties. And so if you just look at the felony line, we're at 16,300 filings over the last 5 years. That's higher than Deschutes by quite a bit. That's higher than Lane, it's higher than Marion, it's higher than Clackamas, and it's almost as high as Washington County. And Washington County's population right now is about 620,000 people. So they got about 400,000 more people within their county than we have here. And they're surrounded, they're up in the metro area. So they certainly have a much higher, I'll say, transient population and people going through their county than we have, just because of where they're geographically located in the state. So when you look at those numbers, it tells me we have a very busy county. A lot of things going on here, a lot of issues, of course, we know that, but this work translates. The officers are busy, our jail's busy, the district attorney is busy, the judges are busy, and everyone is working really kind of what I like to say is we're fighting outside our weight class here. Community justice is on the back end of this, is cleaning it up, playing, the cleanup position because they're dealing with all the adjudicated cases, some pretrial. But this puts work on everybody much differently than other places because we're not resourced like these big counties. I don't know what a DA's office has in Washington County, but I imagine it's considerably bigger than what Beth has here in Jackson County. And so we're all working pretty hard. And I've talked about this before in other jail presentations that I've done is that we like to run red line in Jackson County. We're always at red line, so to speak. We're always got, we're kind of max capacity, so to speak.
Yeah, and Sheriff, on this slide, so like for deputy DAs, I have 21 deputy DAs in Jackson County. Deschutes, which is doing, less than half of our cases in that time period, has 24 deputy DAs. Lane has 28. Marion has 33. Clackamas has 31. Washington, which is almost equal to what we're doing, has 41. And then, of course, Multnomah has 75. So it's a huge difference for per deputy caseloads when you start looking at that difference between number of deputy DAs. And I'm sure it's the same for police officers as well.
Correct. Yeah. So, I think we've gotten used to this type of workload in our county, from everybody from the patrol side all the way up through community justice as far as the criminal justice system goes. And we become, used to it or inoculated to it. And I think, it just becomes the norm, whereas it really creates additional challenges when you have, and again, I don't want to speak for Beth and she can chime in, but, if you had much less caseload, would cases resolve sooner if they could had a chance to work on them differently, if they had more energy or more time to put on each case, same for patrol officers, if they had more time to be proactive, and to, root out problems, at the ground level or where they're occurring instead of just reacting to the problems, would we have this compounding effect of less calls for service, less crime, and so on and so forth. So it is really an issue. And, it's just, how do we address that moving forward?
You look at our court filings against other counties, we still have a huge backlog for the courts, and this sort of speaks to that, but something that we're working on, but with the pandemic, and then the numbers, and then more people being released every day, it's been harder and harder to get those cases going through our system. So I think that's another thing that we also have to look at when we look at how high our numbers are, and then the delays of those going to court.
Back when we opened the court up a little bit in I believe it was June of last year for about a month, we did pretty well then in that basically that opening the court and getting some trials done. And yes, doing that had the effect which we had hoped for, that the actual threat of a trial would help and reduce other cases that were not set for trial. That did happen a little bit, but then of course we had to shut her down again because of Omicron. And I'm really concerned right now. We are opened up. We don't have a social distancing, so we can basically have as many trials as people want to try, but we're not getting a lot of cases tried lately. And that really concerns me. I hope if they finally say, mask off or something like that, we can get back up there to having 2 or 3 trials a week, and some of those significant trials. We have had some significant trials. Unfortunately, a couple of mine ended up in not resolving the entire case. A few convictions, but mistrials on other counts. But that's what I'm really hoping for, that the attitude and the culture kind of changes again, and hopefully get back towards that pre-COVID of, if you got a trial scheduled, it's likely to gonna go. And we've had, that's been another issue with some of our major trials. We had 2 major trials scheduled, but we couldn't do them because of COVID. And that was usually on the defendant's part or an attorney's part. But I have always been concerned about getting cases through the court ever since they've shown up here. Of course, COVID made it horrible. But I think, and Tina has given me a little bit of encouragement with the numbers she showed me last week, that we are starting to trend in the right direction.
Thank you, sir. Here's just another piece of, kind of the workload that we see with warrants for MPD and JCSO. So the majority of the county warrants countywide are entered either through MPD records or JCSO records. And as you can see, we've trended down over the last couple of years, but we're starting to trend back up. And, warrants would be on, people who fail to appear, for instance, or people who don't appear at all, or have a some sort of a court obligation and don't show up and a warrant's entered. Or they could be a suspect in a crime and we've identified them and the district attorney could issue a warrant for their arrest. So that's another means a warrant could come out. You look in 2017, we had, our highest number of warrants at 13,660, 10,000 were for FTA, over 10,000. That's a significant problem. I think it still remains that today. I think the judges would attest to that. We're starting to see that number come back up where we were down considerably, half of that number after a couple of years of having some adequate, not adequate, but better jail space and the FTA program. And then, as we had to reduce space again at our facility, we're starting to see that FTA number crawl back up. And I know that's a huge issue for our judges and everybody else. It contributes to some significant workloads when somebody doesn't show up for court. And if you want to expand on that, Judge Mejia, feel free, but I do know that you're passionate about those.
We just have a lot of paperwork that we just have to do over and over. But another thing that it really affects is kind of the court capacity. Even though we don't have social distancing, we're trying to keep, the number of people in the courthouse as low as we can. And we just have to keep resetting cases over and over again. So we might not have the number of people scheduled that we actually could get through if people showed up. So yeah, that is a big problem now. The FTA, well, it's like you said, Sheriff. I mean, sometimes you guys are now even releasing people who have already made it to the chronic FTA list just because you don't have any room. And when we see those people on the list, we try to hold them on for a little bit, but we got the capacity issue.